everybody, I'm Nora Burrows. I recently finished 2 quilts that I think are pretty interesting. The first one back here, and I'll show you a better look in a minute. This is a commissioned quilt that was brought to me by my friend Muna, quilt maker Muna. You may know her from that friendship quilt series that I'm doing. We're exchanging those 2 quilts. Anyway, her friend Vin asked her to make him a quilt that kind of represented his life. And that's not quite what Muna does in terms of her love of quilt making, but she knew that I really like to do that kind of thing. So she passed the project on to me, and I had such a blast making it. This is a pretty darn big quilt. I'm gonna back up so you can see. I don't have the exact measurements, but I'm pretty sure that this is a twin size. It was supposed to be a throw size, but it's a pretty big throw. Let me show you the quilt and we can talk about the elements, and then I'll show you the second quilt, which is, you know, one of my favorites. This is such a large quilt that I can't fit the whole thing in the screen from where I'm at, but let me kind of scroll up here. You can see those half circles at the top represent that he was born on the vernal equinox, and then down at the way bottom, you can see some of those squares, those flying geese, and I'll tell you about those in a minute. But let's take a look at the middle section. Many of these squares are logos. So we have the EMS logo up there. He's an EMS worker. You know, we have, this is a goat on a hill. That's the logo of a organization he belongs to. We have the Ski Patrol logo. This is I think it's a half, is it a half triathlon, I think is what that is. Which it's 70.3 miles is part of that. And 46er means that he has climbed, I think, the highest 46 mountains in New Hampshire or something like that. So on this quilt, there are actually 46 mountains in total, including these 3, the ones in that block, the mountains here, and then these mountains here, and all of those mountain triangles all add up to 46. He has, can't remember what kind of dog he has, but this is whatever kind of dog he has. I think it's a golden retriever, maybe. I'm not a dog. I love dogs, but I don't have one and I don't know a lot about them, but whatever that dog is. Let's see, the Adirondack Mountain Club is up here. He's a bike rider. So those are kind of just all like the general logos that I could fit in a square. Over here we have the maple leaves, and he saps, or for 10 years he sapped maple from trees to make maple syrup. He loves to ski, and so these are like some ski mountains. His favorite season is winter, so we have the snowflakes. So this is a pieced snowflake here, and then these ones are appliqued on. I just traced a bunch of different snowflake shapes onto Wonder Under and then stitched along the edge. That's how I did most of the logos. So for example, I'd get a picture of a logo and I'd trace it onto the Wonder Under, and that's how I did those, along with some of the big stitching to define some of the sections there. Since it's white on white, I needed to kind of define that. And then this stitched line is actually part of the logo. We talked about the vernal equinox blocks up here. These are quarter circles sewn together to be half circles, and in just a variety of, you know, scrappy blacks and whites and grays. He is a geologist, and that kind of brings in these long strips on the side. These are supposed to be kind of the rock layers, and that was his idea, which I think is pretty cool and came out pretty successfully. How I would do this is cut out kind of a random strip and then tuck it under, iron the tucked under section, and then just top stitch it to another piece, and then do the same, cut the other piece, tuck it under, iron it, and then top stitch. Down here we have the sailboat scene. He has owned 3 sailboats, and at least one of them had kind of a burgundy red bottom and then a white sail, so I just went with that kind of visual consistency down there. We talked about the mountains. Now, he has 2 kids, and so these 2 trees are representing the kids, and I embroidered their initials and birth dates on the trees. For the backing here, I chose this really handsome plaid. It is a flannel. It is also a flannel binding. It's kind of this navy herringbone print. I did a mix of machine quilting and hand quilting. So for the machine quilting, I really just tacked down some of the bigger sections. So, you know, I'd machine quilt the square here and the inner square, and then each one of these 9 squares I machine quilted stitch in the ditch, and then I went through and in addition machine quilted some of these kind of curvy pieces along the side, and then I went back and really hand stitched a lot around the various shapes, and much of that you can't see even up close because my stitching thread is like almost exactly the same color as my background. Here, let's see if we can take a look. So I hand quilted, you can see a little bit of the thread there, but I went around each one of the snowflakes. Same with the leaves. You can see I have brown stitching, you can barely see it. And after this is washed, you will be able to see the stitching a little bit more. Yeah, even up close, it's really, really difficult to see any stitches. But hand stitched, not big stitch quilting, just the regular little stitches, which is the first time I've done that. So I've been working on this since last fall pretty consistently. This took me a very, very long time, really an exceptionally long time, and a lot of my other projects got put on the back burner because I really wanted to finish this because, you know, as months were going by, I felt like I wanted to be done with it. I enjoyed the process, but I'm also certainly ready to be done. So I will give this to him shortly. He lives about an hour away from me, so we're gonna meet up and I'll hand that off to him. Let me show you the next quilt. Here's the quilt. Let me tell you about it for a minute and then I'll back up and we can look at the whole thing. We had a guild member named Ellen who was a member of the guild for a very, very long time, far longer than since I've been around the guild. She had significant health challenges, many life challenges that I won't go into, but you just lots of hardships. And she passed away, complications from a surgery. And this was probably a year and a half ago or so. I helped to clean out, she didn't have any direct family, she didn't have a spouse or kids. So myself and a couple guild members went and helped clean out her space, and she had many bins and bins and bins of fabric. Now, Ellen loved tiny pieces of fabric, so we're not talking about very much yardage. It was a lot of little tiny pieces, and because she had such a mass amount of it, it was really hard for us to just dump it. Now, many of these fabrics had stains, had tears. Ellen didn't care so much at all, really, about perfect anything, perfect fabric or points, none of that. She had a really interesting style. I think that she was in some ways an artistic genius, and I've tried to recreate emotionally some of the projects that she's done, and you just can't. She had really 2 ends of the spectrum. Either she made kind of beautiful pieces of art, or she would make kind of these weird quilts that had like SpongeBob SquarePants pattern, you know, fabric, or fabric that you just would never consider to be an art piece, and very undesirable, I would say, to most people who did not know Ellen. So it was really these two opposite ends of the spectrum. Point being, she had a lot of small pieces and we needed to figure out what to do with them. So one of the things that we did with them is we decided to make a guild challenge, and we took 40, what is it, a gallon? Those Ziploc bags that are like this big, I think that's a gallon. Ziploc bags, and stuffed them full of scraps, as many scraps as we could fit in. And we said anybody who wanted to participate in the challenge could take a bag. So, and I didn't think many of those bags were going to be taken, but like immediately they were all gone. And I actually got emails from people saying, do you have any more bags left? Because they were gone by the time I could grab one. So I had a bag, and this is the quilt that I made out of her bag. And the directions were basically like, you don't have to use all the fabric in the bag. You can supplement your own fabric. You can make a big quilt or a small quilt. But this is what I made, and most of it is Ellen's fabric. some of it is also my own fabric. The last thing I'll say about Ellen is that when she died, in addition to her fabric, when she passed away, in addition to her fabric, she also had quite a few of her quilts. Many of them she had gifted away over the years, or given to our small quilt auction for our show and things like that. So a lot of them she didn't have anymore, but many of them she did. And so we had a little show at the church that she went to. We had a show of her work with an auction where people could come and bid on her pieces. And I won three of her pieces because I am a little obsessed with her work. So after this, I'll show you quickly, I wasn't gonna do this, but I'll show you quickly a couple of her pieces, and then maybe I'll put a picture of her at the end of this video. So let's take a look at this baby here. The pieces that really stood out to me when I went through my bag, because I grabbed a random bag. I didn't even make the bags. Joyce made the bag, so I've mentioned in a previous video. Anyway, I took a random bag, so I didn't know what was in there. And my bag happened to have quite a few kind of tropical prints in it. You can see one kind of up here, and there's a couple down here. We'll get a closer look in a minute. And so I kind of tried to go with that tropical vibe. I pulled from the bag any print that was even remotely tropical or of tropical colors. Now you'll notice the quilt now is not, it doesn't read as tropical, but that is where kind of my inspiration started. The border, the border here, it's almost kind of like big ferns. We'll get a closer look in a minute, but that is Tana lawn fabric. That fabric is incredibly expensive, and I bought that fabric when I actually went to London 2 years ago, and I was holding on to this fabric plus a couple other pieces I have of the Tana lawn, which is the Liberty of London. In London is where I got it. And then I was trying to decide a border for this quilt, and I thought it would be kind of cool with it, but I was like, am I really gonna use this very, very, very expensive fabric with kind of this Ellen scrap quilt? And I toyed with it for a while because I have been saving this for something special, but I decided that this was pretty special, and I love this quilt, so I decided to use it. The inner border here is Ellen's. Like I mentioned, she didn't have a lot of yardage, but this was one of the pieces of yardage, and it's pretty cool. So let's look at some of these pieces, and I hand quilted, big stitch quilted this. I'm still in the process of big stitch quilting it. So here's kind of this big fern fabric here, and you can see some of the stitching, the big stitch quilting that I've done to outline some of these pieces. And then this is the really cool yardage fabric that Ellen had. I just think it's so awesome. And I'll just kind of go around and show a little bit of the big stitch quilting. I outlined the big ferns on both of these pieces here. I quilted a circle, which, because this is polyester batting, it really has this nice poof to it around the pieces that are quilted. And then quilted around things like these flowers here. Over here, I quilted the moons, and so the moons kind of have a little bit of a pop. Not all the moons, just the ones in the middle. And went along, you know, the lines. I tried to follow lines, or here I would, I big stitch quilted, it's hard to see, but along these kind of curvy lines, and because it's kind of a repeated curvy pattern, when you stitch it, it gives an interesting pattern of poof. You can see the stitching here. So for each, and again, quilted kind of in a grid here. So I quilted all of these different pieces of fabric differently. Here the quilting kind of goes, and this, it's hard to see on the video, but this really does poof out these darker diamonds in a pretty interesting way. And then for the backing, here you can see some of the quilting through the back there, but for the backing, this is a flannel, just a really neutral but geometric flannel that I think is really effective. And then for the binding, I used the same print as the border. Here's Ellen's first piece. This is my favorite one that I bid on and won. You really have to look closer at this to really appreciate it, and I will get a closer look for us so you can see the details. But you know, backed up here, you can see it's a waterfall along the mountain ledge. This is a local waterfall, actually. But let me show you what happens when you get a closer look. First, I want to say that, you know, I had seen this piece and I loved it so much, but at one point, I realized that this fabric down here is actually stockings, like nylon stockings that women wear. And when I realized that, my heart just melted. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, those are like probably Ellen's old stockings. And I think that is just the coolest thing. Talk about, you know, upcycling. But let's look here. So here, the top of the waterfall, you can see is all yarn. And, you know, she didn't even like separate the yarn. She just kind of clumped it together and then stitched it on there. Ellen's stitching is almost all hand stitched. However, it's really, you know, like this is when I say I mean the quilting. You can see these quilting stitches here. These are pretty small stitches for her, actually. She usually does not only big stitching, but really almost basting stitches. You'd think that it was just basted, ready to be quilted, but that was how she always left it. And then you can see for the waterfall here, how she kind of did these interesting running stitches, and I think those are pretty common stitches, but I don't know how to do them or what they're called. She used a lot of beads in her work. So you can see at the bottom of the waterfall here, she has some beads. Here's the nylon stockings that I was talking about. And again, they're all stained. She didn't care about things like rips and stains and such. This is, you know, pretty severely stained, almost mildewy stains over here. And none of this bothers me. I think it's just who she was. It was part of her creative process. She wasn't worried about perfection. There's more beads here. For the edge, you can see she didn't bind it. She just, you know, did this stitch along the outside. So this is called Wild River, and it was made in 2019. Here's another one that's kind of a similar feel to the last piece. It's funny because all three works of hers that I ended up with are all landscape pieces, and that really wasn't typical of her work. I do have some photos from the show we held for her of her other work, and at the end of this video, after I show a picture of her, I will show some of her other work that's much different from this, but still very cool. Again, we have the cliffs over here. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about this is how I ended up with this. So I had bid on this piece, but then I was outbid. And I was organizing this show, so I was kind of the contact person. And I went around and I, you know, distributed the quilts to the people who had won and collected the money, so on and so forth. And a couple weeks after I had distributed this to the winner, she contacted me and said that she had purchased this for her mother, and her mother didn't really want it. Her mother is a member of the church that Ellen is a member of, and I think the mother had bought a different piece of Ellen's. So the mother was like, I don't really want this one. So the daughter who had bought it contacted me and said, you know, does the person second on the list want to buy it? And that happened to be me. And I was like, yes, I do. So that's how I ended up with this one. Again, you have the nylon stockings down here, and these kind of run up this way in an interesting fashion. And then what's special about this, many things are special about this, but are these horses, and maybe that's, what do you think that is? Maybe a like dog or coyote or fox or wolf or something like that. And then, you know, she has this just puff of cloud that she sewed on. Again, these really big stitches. And the background, the sky here, is just spectacular, you know. And then she did much of the same with the yarn that she did in the other piece. But this fabric she used for the cliffs is really perfect. And, you know, just raw edge here. But these are really special pieces. This piece is called Time and Memory, to remember someone always in my heart, and it was made in 2022. Here we have a lake scene. This was made in 2013. Sequins used in the lighthouse. A lot of silks used in this piece. And then this kind of furry stuff is kind of fun down here. Get a closer look at this furry stuff here. It feels really good, and the way the light hits it is pretty awesome. And then these sailboats, they're just so simple. So simple, each one, but really effective. You know, you don't have to have great art. You don't have to have great sewing skills to do these kinds of things. You just have to have an imagination, and she had quite the imagination. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.